On this podcast, we're breaking the silence. Welcome to Mental Health. It's time to talk. Here's your host, Allan Kehler.
Good day, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. Today, I'm very excited to bring to you the one, the only Rod Pedersen. Rod, thank you so much for taking the time to join the show.
What a build-up. Thank you, Allan. How are you, my friend?
Living the dream, they say.
That's good.
Rod, you know, anybody can go onto good old Google, do a search for Rod Pedersen. That individual will find things like, yes, Hall of Fame broadcaster. Yes, Rod, you have done television stints with Rogers, Sportsnet, The Score, best-selling author. But Rod, the thing that stands out for me the most is the fact that you are sober. Rod, for me, the greatest accomplishment to date, the thing that stands out, what resonates, is that you are sober.
Thank you. Well, it is for me too, by the way, Allan. I appreciate that. Yeah, and if I may, my dad, who's a recovering alcoholic, quit drinking when I was 2, so I had no recollection of him drinking, told me near the end of his life, he passed away 2 years ago. He said, of all the things that you've done,
Oh, sorry, we lost you there, Rod. Are you there?
did we break up? Am I still there?
Yeah, you're back. We just cut out for a bit.
Hang on a second. Now I lost you with that same audio problem. I'm sorry, Allan.
No worries. No worries. We'll get
Might
it
want to
figured out.
pause that 1 second.
Sure. And this, ladies and gentlemen, this is the reality of technology. So bear with us. Yes, we'll definitely be taking some questions. I see that in the comment box there. So once we can get Rod back here up and running, we will have a bit of a dialogue. We will see where the conversation goes. And yes, at the end, feel free to ask some questions. Rod was just having some challenges with good old Wi-Fi. Looks like he is coming back into the studio. Patience. Maybe you have a question for me while we wait for Rod. But regardless, we'll get it figured out. For everybody who's tuning in right now, just a little bit of an update. Rod has left the virtual studio due to technical difficulties. So bear with us. He is trying to sign back on, and then hopefully Rod will be joining us. Well, this is awkward. Any questions for me while we wait? The plan is we're going to talk to Rod about everything from sobriety, a little bit about mental illness, anxiety, identity, masculinity. If any of those resonate, or if you have questions, feel free to ask them already, or should they come up a little later on? Or if you even just want to comment throughout, that would be great. At this moment, yes, we are still waiting for Rod Pedersen. So my apologies for this technical difficulty. Feel free just to keep on scrolling throughout Facebook. Oh, hang on. We're going to try one more time. Hello, Rod.
Hi, Allan.
Hey, that sounds crystal clear. How am I coming through?
Yeah, you're good. Good thing this isn't live.
Well, actually, it is.
Oh, it is? I'm sorry.
That's no problem.
We're
That
good
is
now?
no problem.
We're good.
So, Rod, you were saying that your father had mentioned that sobriety was probably your greatest accomplishment as well, yes?
Yeah, that was it. He said, and I know exactly where the screen blacked out. He said to me, he said, of all the things that you've accomplished, the thing I'm proudest of is you getting sober. And he tagged that by saying, because it is a bitch. I'll never forget him saying that. And he would know. And Allan, is anybody watching this probably? And you and I know it is a bitch. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, that is only one of the words, Rod, that comes to mind when I think about sobriety and recovery. And I'm curious, what emotions surface when you think about January 27th, 2015?
Not, anybody you would think would be proud of that. And I'm not really. There's still a lot of shame, Allan. If you want me to be honest, which I think you do, it was not a good time. I was forced into an intervention. It was the most embarrassing time of my life. Looking back, I shouldn't have been as embarrassed, but I was, because I was on the radio, incoherent, in a combination of prescription drugs and alcohol, and sent home from work that I don't even remember. So doesn't really make me want to celebrate it. And I remember waking up the next morning, not remembering how I got there at home, which wasn't rare. That had happened a lot. But I remember pulling my phone out and texting my boss and saying, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. It's never happened before. It won't happen again. And him saying, you're suspended. Stay home until we decide what to do with you. And, in less than 24 hours, I was facing an intervention, and I had two choices: to get into recovery or keep doing what I was doing, but I was going to lose my job and lose my family and anything else that was important to me. So you really came out swinging with the heavy questions here.
That's the only way to go, my friend.
Yeah.
And I mean, you mentioned career, you mentioned family. Obviously, those were two things that you valued. So were those really the catalyst for change then? Was there anything else that could have happened that would have influenced you or encouraged you to move towards change?
The 1,000 times before that, the people were in my face saying you need to quit drinking didn't. Like, I don't know what it was that day, other than it was is my good friend Bob Merrier, interventionist, says it was hammer time. It was hammer time. It was the end of the line. And so was there any other? I don't know. I just remember saying, I'm done living like this. I'm done keeping these balls in the air. I'm done the fight. I'm done. We've all had that moment. You've obviously had that moment. And I guess now when I'm doing interventions or dealing with families primarily, and they say, we need an intervention, I'm like, are you at the end of the line with this guy? Like, is there any more wiggle room that you're willing to put up with his shit? Because if you are, I'm not wasting my time. I was at the end of the line. Fair?
Totally fair. And that's what fascinates me the most, Rod. Everyone's end of the line looks different, doesn't it? And it's like we always say, sick and tired of being sick and tired, but timing was everything on January 27th, 2015. And yet you talk about shame. And that is probably one of the most common emotions that people mention when it comes to addiction. And how is it then that you have been able to navigate through some of that shame?
It's a good question, but I just want to, when you bring up January 27th, I want to tell you a funny story, because a couple of years ago, I was to speak at a banquet in Shellbrook, 44 kilometers north of PA. And my anxiety was through the roof. Like, I was riddled with it, because it was a hockey banquet. And I'm like, I'm a perceived football guy. Why are they hiring me? For 5 hours driving north of Regina. What am I going to talk about? What if they don't like me? You know the feelings. And I walked into the hall in Shellbrook, and a guy came up to me and he said, "Hi, Rod, I'm Scott Moe." And I said, "Pleased to meet you, Scott. What do you do?" And he, like, that's how rattled I was, right? And he's like, "In 3 weeks, I'm going to be the premier of the province." I'm like, "Don't!" But
that's beautiful.
And then he goes, "And by the way, January 27th has quite a significance to you, huh?" And I'm like, What? And I was sober by this point, Allan, but I was so just rattled about the whole evening. I blew this first meeting with Scott Moe, and he's bringing up my sober date, and it didn't even dawn on me that it was a thing. Like, you get all of that. So I know it isn't your question, but I look back and I'm so angry at the situations in my life that not only alcohol ruined, but anxiety ruined, and depression ruined, and OCD and all the others. But in terms of the shame, I'll sum it up in one sentence. The first time I was asked to speak at the Recovery Day Regina luncheon, which was my coming out party of sobriety, I think I was just over a year sober. I just said, I've lived 25 years in shame and regret and embarrassment. I'm not living the next 25 years ashamed of anything. So, and then the place went nuts. I'm like, that wasn't for effect. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't saying that to get that. I'm not going to live in this crap anymore. So I'll stand here and tell you my story, but I'm not going to feel ashamed for the next 25 years because I had these problems. I'm not doing it. And that really resonated with people in the room, I guess.
Well, it resonates with me. I just find it fascinating, Rod, that it was that simple for you, that it was simply the switch of a mind, because I cannot do that. I wish that I could just take that ball and chain of shame and leave it behind, but I have a very hard time still, carrying it. But I guess maybe it is that simple. Maybe it's just that mindset that I need to reiterate. I don't want that shit anymore.
I hope you can, because I have. And from time to time, I'm coming up on 6 years sober, but the memories still come into my mind, and I will feel guilty for something that I did in the past. But I'm like, I haven't done anything in the last almost 6 years to feel guilty about. So why am I feeling guilty? Like, it's over. And I guess the main thing is the close enough people to me realize that I made a change, realize what I was struggling with. There are some people close to me that still haven't forgiven me for things that happened 20 years ago. I'm sorry to say, but that's their problem, not mine. I've made the change. I'm not, it was a mindset that day, Allan. I'm not joking.
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. And that's a good point, that when it comes to forgiveness, you don't have to own that. You don't have to carry that. And I guess that's similar to shame. That is a conscious decision.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's what I would, I don't know why it was so easy for me, but I can tell you, the day of that intervention, that I was ready to stop living that way. I've just made it up in my mind, and I'm not going to live that way anymore. Dealing with people now, I understand, that are early on in recovery or contemplating recovery, it's very difficult for them. But, by the way, with shame and regret, we could spend an hour on this, but I know why people don't want to come out with their story publicly that they got sober. I totally understand it. I'm sure I've been denied opportunities career-wise since I've announced that I'm in recovery, or I still battle 5 severe mental illnesses, but I don't care. I think you and I had this chat on the phone the other day. 20 years ago, when I was getting all these offers, I was an absolute basket case, alcoholic, and you guys all thought I had my stuff together. Right? Now, I've never been stronger, seen more clearer, been more reliable, and you don't want to hire me because I got OCD? Again, your problem, not mine, because I'm happy.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point, Rod. And to Justin's point, he says letting go and starting over. That's just it, letting go, not letting it have any kind of power over us anymore. And that is interesting because, see, you are very much in the public eye, have been for a long period of time. I spent a lot of years worrying about judgment. And the thing is, we will always be judged for what we do, right? And I'm just curious, how have you been able to ultimately let go of others' thoughts and opinions of Rod Pedersen?
I don't know. It comes up daily, but I mean, the one thing as a public person, people are always trying to find leverage against you or something to bring you down. So I can tell you that once you stand there, and I've had a lot of close friends say to me, you've bared your soul to everybody. You've admitted all of your past failings. what is there to use against you anymore? There's no secrets, you know?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting angle, isn't it? Just transparency. Put it all out there. Be vulnerable. Now what?
Yeah, that's all I can say. I've especially in today's day and age of cancel culture, because I hear a lot of people say to me, "Oh, you're a public person. You got to be really careful what you say." I'm like, "No, I say what I think, and anybody that tries to cancel me, what are you gonna do? Oh, you did this. Oh, you did that. Yes, I did. 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Yes, I did. I'm not proud of that person, but guess what? I'm not the same person anymore. Ask around. So I guess people are trying to knock you down every day, but when you take away their weapons from them, there's nothing they can do.
That's a good point. And I mean, ownership. You obviously own everything, which is very admirable. I know that you've mentioned a few times, with various mental illness. I know anxiety was one of them for you, Rod. What also resonates for me is in one of our previous conversations, you said that it was right around grade 10 where there was something quite evident that you were different than the people around you. What made you different, and how did you even recognize that in grade 10?
I can't recall how it came about. I just distinctly remember thinking, and just remember, I came from a small town where there were 16 kids in our class and 5 of us were related. And most of us had been together right from day one of kindergarten up until that point in grade 10. And I was just looking around the room. It was English class. And I'm like, I'm different than everybody else. And it wasn't like I was homicidal or having any like real deranged thoughts. It's just I see things differently than everybody else in this room. It is what it was not a poor me. It wasn't. It was just and then it's not saying I'm better or worse. I'm just different than everybody. And I was before I even really discovered alcohol.
Right. And I think for me, Rod, that really resonates because similar to you, except it was grade 9 for me, English class, when everybody was told, go home and write a poem and we're going to put it on the walls and read it out loud later. And my poem was very dark. It was very much about depression and who am I and loss of identity. And I put it up on those walls and I'm reading everyone else's poems about sports and their dog and joy. I'm like, what? But that identity piece, did you find that as you navigated through all those years struggling with alcoholism and getting various labels, did you have a hard time with who am I? Who is Rod Pedersen? Not
until I got sober. I was lost and didn't know I was lost. Is that fair? And when I started, Allan, it sounds really dumb. And I talk about the crutch of alcohol and using my dad. I didn't realize how much I used my dad for, if I had a problem, I'd call him all the time in every regard. And then he was gone, like he passed away a couple of years ago. But when I got into recovery and I'm in 12-step meetings, I'm like, I don't have an opinion. I don't have a soul. I don't know. I have no barometer of what's right. So it was getting sober, getting everything back. And that's why I often say it's not recovery, it's discovery. Discovering, wait a minute, I like this. Wait a minute, this is how I feel. And with kids, I mean, you're a dad, like, wasn't that long into getting sober that I would have an opinion about family things. And my wife and kids would look at me and go, what? Where did you come from? Because normally I was either drunk in the corner or sleeping off a hangover or not home. You know what I mean? So it's I don't even remember what the question was anymore. But you said, how did I deal with discovering who I am? It wasn't until I got sober and just realized, wait, there's a person here. And I do have thoughts on this. And I do know the difference between right and wrong. So, and all those things that made me happy as a kid and preteen, anything prior to alcohol, they all came back,
Yeah. And I guess I feel as though it's almost, Rod, as though the soul goes into hibernation, right? We're still here, but that identity piece kind of just vanishes, but it comes back. And now you are a recovery coach. And do you see similar patterns that you went through in the people that you're working with, where all of a sudden there is this rediscovery, as you so eloquently put it, where they're starting to go within and work through some of that emotion?
Oh, yeah. Do I see any? I see it in every single one of them, as do you. And depending on how screwed up they are, I'm like, I'm going to tell you something, but I know your brain isn't even working. So I'm going to keep telling you this every day, because your brain's not functioning properly. And that's because it's so mangled on booze or drugs or other just various thought patterns. It might have nothing to do with substances. So do I see it? It's like, yes. But as you and I talked about on the phone the other day, I was like, I can't get mad at them because that was you. And people took the time to help you get sorted out. And you're going to do the same thing for this person. And so that's how I deal with it.
Yeah, it's very much a process, isn't it? Not an event. It takes a long time to create those new pathways. Patience is obviously essential. But I'm curious, Rod, especially in that first year of recovery for you, how were you able to silence some of those voices so that you did not go back to old behaviors?
The voices in my own head?
Yeah.
It was, I don't know how much we can talk about 12-step meetings, but it was going to a hell of a lot. To me, a hell of a lot, probably 3 a week. And it was that whole dark wolf, white wolf, black wolf, white wolf thing. The more that I fed the white wolf, the quieter the black wolf got. So the more work that I put into recovery, I wasn't hearing those voices anymore. And as much as, I had some clashes with personalities early on in recovery, it all helped, and everybody kept saying that, year 1 was hard, but year 2 is harder. Everybody kept saying that. And my 1-year birthday, it's just, you think you've done all the work, but you haven't. It's just starting now. And I'm like, oh, damn. Okay. And then I got into the second year and I'm like, wait a minute. This is a piece of cake. All I got to do is stay sober and everything gets better. Year 1, we had this discussion the other day with some of my coworkers and my wife. You've heard the saying, it takes 21 days to create a habit and 90 days to create a lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that is for earthlings, but for people like you and I fully believe it's 90 days to create a habit and a year to create a lifestyle. At least that was my personal experience. Because if you can stay sober for 90 days, I got a guy writing me today from Vancouver, Allan. He's on his 2nd day sober, Allan, and he was, wanted a parade. And I'm like, I get a sense that 2 days for this guy was a major accomplishment.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? So you want to talk 90? That's looking at the top of the mountain for somebody that's struggling right now. So you come out of that fog after 90 days. I'm getting to your question about how hard it is in year 1. And you look back and go, what have I done? Do you know what I mean? And that can cause a lot of people to crash when they realize, wait, what? So you hope to prop them up and keep them sober. And once you get to a year, I believe then it's a sober lifestyle. It doesn't happen like that, as we know.
Yeah, no doubt. And you think about the people who you surrounded yourself with previously. And this isn't even just about sobriety and recovery. This is just wellness in general. How important is it to surround yourself with people who lift you up? I mean, again, think about who both you and I surrounded ourselves with years ago when we were active in addiction, and compare that to the people that we have today.
Well, it's, this isn't a big city. I mean, those friends that I drank with are still my friends. I'd like to think I never really lost any friends. I just stopped hanging out with them. Some of them got angry that I quit drinking, angry that I was forced to quit drinking, even though in reality it was my choice.
Right.
But I started to obviously hang around with the 12-step people. And then before long, that's all I wanted to hang around with, because they were the only people that I trusted. And I knew they were the only people that had my best interests at heart. And they're still my closest friends. But when I went public with my story, I kind of wore it as a badge of honor because I was at concerts, for instance, or sporting games or whatever. And people would text me and say, Rod, are you here? Are you in the building? And I'm like, yeah, why? Oh, I just want to know there was one other sober person here. You know how good that can feel, right? As somebody that's struggling and trying to stay. So I took that as a badge of honor that, and I still do, that Rod will always be the sober guy. So don't think you're the only one. There will always be one more, and that I'm very proud of that.
As you should be. And that's one of the benefits of just being vulnerable, of being transparent, that it gives other people permission to know that they're not the only one. Like for you, Rod, when you even go back at some of those struggles all those years, there must have been moments where you definitely wanted out of that lifestyle. But see, for this is how it works in life. I mean, if you haven't gone through something, it's very difficult to articulate. But I think that a lot of people still have that question, well, why don't you just stop? And I'm sure that you've heard that before, but how can you even explain that to people? Why is it more difficult than just stopping?
Just quitting. I can explain that real well, and thanks for the opportunity. It's a great question. We talking about my dad. He quit like just flipping a light switch. White knuckled it, if you will. Never went to a meeting and transferred his addiction to other things. But he never did quit. He never drank again. So when I was getting in a lot of trouble in my late 30s and I wanted to quit, just flip a light switch, and I couldn't, I actually gave up. I'm like, I'm worse than my dad. I'm the worst of the worst. I can't quit. And that's when the roof caved in. Like I had people grabbing me by the lapels. What's wrong with you? My wife, my coworkers, my boss, everybody, Allan. I'm like, you don't understand. I can't quit. I'm the worst of the worst. I'm one of those. Like, leave me. You know what I mean? And that's why I appreciate doing this interview, because the opportunity to get that message out, because I quite often when I speak, people say, what's your main message? I'm like, it's never too late. Nobody's beyond hope. I mean, the longer that I do this recovery coaching business, I've seen the worst of the worst of the worst. I'm not saying I've got, had a role in getting them sober. I've seen instances. I'm like, if this person can get sober, anybody can get sober. So the question, like, I gave up on myself. And I had a moment the other night where I remember my wife was laughing, and I remember back in my drinking days, just looking at her. We were at a Christmas party, and she was talking to some guy at the party, and I'm like, she would be better off with him. I'm a loser. She's going nowhere with me. She doesn't even know it, but her life's going down the tubes being married to me. You know what I mean? Can you imagine feeling much lower than that? And that's why when I see addicts and alcoholics now, I know exactly what's in their mind. And people treat them like shit because you think you deserve to be treated like shit. You know what I mean? You don't stand up for yourself and think you deserve better because you're an alcoholic, you're drunk, you're an addict. It's the worst feeling. And I would like to be able to, as we said earlier, to just reach in and pull them in and go, it's not too late. But so many people have given up on themselves. So that's the message I try to say. And when I leave a school, I say, if it ever happens, you're one out of those 10 and you find yourself in a ditch sometime like I did, or locked out of a house, nowhere to go, and you think there must be a better life than this, there is. There are kids in this room that will find themselves in that situation. And when you're a teen, you don't think that'll ever happen to you. So I'm just trying to put it in their head that when it does happen, remember that guy telling you that day in the school gymnasium that there's a way out.
Yeah, plant that seed of hope. Yeah, I mean, you and I both did not grow up hoping or wanting to struggle with mental illness or become an addict.
Nope.
But, Rod, you mentioned with your father, he was able to quit with the alcohol, but then he kind of turned into different things. Some people would call that cross addiction. And I know for myself, I just viewed it as I needed to continue to live outside of myself because I did not want to look at this. So all of a sudden, I mean, geez, Rod, I started to literally, I was addicted to coin collecting. Then all of a sudden I was addicted to garage sailing. Rod, who buys 55 creamers and 50 teacups and over 100 pairs of earrings? What? But it was just a way to live out here. So I'm wondering for yourself, did you now in hindsight, can you look back and see, I can see how I kind of went down this path and then I had to pull back or not?
Oh, all the time. Absolutely all the time. I mean, fortunately, my wife will listen to this on occasion. Otherwise, I wear her out. Like we have a men's mental health club that's unfortunately been paused because of the pandemic, because of groups. But I'm like, that's where I go to talk about this stuff because I do wear my wife out on this. But so my dad transferred his addiction to gambling and work and smoking more than anything. But my brothers and my family don't mind me talking about dad. With mom, they're a little less open with because we didn't realize she just passed away last year. She was battling some mental health issues as well. Not that they were insignificant, but we checked her into the hospital because of her cancer diagnosis, and they were going through her list of medications. And the nurse was like, she has enough anti-anxiety medication to tranquilize a horse. No, you guys didn't know this? No. She was very closed about that. And antidepressants. So I was telling my wife that the other day. We were driving around the ring road, and I said, so I inherited mom's issues in this regard and my dad's issues in addiction. I'm a goddamn miracle that I'm even sitting here right now. Because neither one of my brothers have either. Right? So I look back at all those things that my mom dealt with that we didn't know. It was just weird, but it was, you know what I mean? Just absent-mindedness and raging anxiety and things. And then my dad's, I'm just like, how the hell did I manage this? And I don't say poor me because you might get a kick out of this, but I mean, I'm fairly talented with regards to talking and hosting and being on a stage with a mic. So when a plumber comes to our house or a carpenter and I can't do the simplest things and my family gets upset at me going, you're not a man. You can't fix this pipe. You can't do this. I'm like, can that guy go walk on a stage and make 3,500 people laugh? That's what I do. So I just think that God, when he was stirring me up, just took, I'm going to sprinkle in some OCD and some anxiety and some depression. But I'm going to sprinkle in this talent too and give it a big stir and see how he does. What
a concoction, hey? What a recipe.
What a Molotov cocktail that was.
Yeah, and yet you were the chosen one. You were the one who could obviously handle it. And I love the fact that you have been able to take something incredibly difficult, challenging, overwhelming, spin it back, look at yourself, work through it, and then also be in a position to assist others who are where you once were.
Yeah. Well, what my wife said about that, by the way, was, but you're good now. And I said, yeah, thanks for noticing. I mean, as you and I have talked about, I'm very proud that I'm not medicated and I'm obviously not using any substances. So I'm on top of these things. But I'm still learning, Allan, because I was speaking to a group, the rural municipality of some group here. And a lady came up to me and she says, can you help me with my son? And she goes, I'm taken to a psychologist. And I said, what's his issues? And she said, ADHD. I'm like, and? She goes, no, ADHD. I'm like, that's it? And I realized that's a very serious thing. And it was ruining his life and causing problems in theirs just because it's not as many as I have, or it's still important to them. And that was a couple of years ago now, but I'm still figuring these things out because I tend to blurt things out. But I'm just like, I can give you a variety of things to deal with that don't involve medication, or you can use medication. There's nothing saying there's anything wrong with that. But I'm like, this is very manageable, very treatable, and let's get him on the right road and get on with his life.
Yeah, exactly. Perspective. And then you think about the rural, and you and I both grew up in very small towns, Saskatchewan. I mean, I had 4.5 roads. We didn't talk about this kind of stuff. And I'm sure you too, Rod, see this repeatedly, where in those small towns, perhaps there is more stigma, more shame, or, you know, even the role of alcohol continues to be significant. Are you seeing a shift in, you know, more and more people feeling comfortable putting a voice to this? Do you think we're moving the right way?
Wow, is that a good question? And I certainly don't have an answer for that. But I do remember one time in Swift Current, about a year ago, coming up on 2 years ago, actually, when we could have groups, now that I think about it, some guy just stood up and he's like, I'm in from a small town and I can't stand on the table and say I'm struggling like you. I don't want the whole town to know. And I said, look, it's all online, man. You can seriously Google symptoms of anxiety, symptoms of depression, treatment for anxiety. It's all there. Here's my number. Call me. I'm like, thank God you stood up and said that. But there's so many resources out there for you that you don't even need to leave your house. The main thing is, let's just talk about it. Thank God you did. And I think that you and I do have a real benefit of coming from a rural background, because I was still dealing with this farmer, and his wife said to me, thank God that you, and he was in his early 40s. He goes, thank God that you do come from the rural background, so you understand the pressures on people in these communities, the pressure to drink, the inability to get a ride share, you know, all these things. City people would have no clue what rural people deal with.
That's very true. It's very true. And yet, if you can have one person from that rural community stand up and openly say, this is what I'm dealing with, I can promise you that what's going to happen is there's going to be someone else who says, holy, you too? You too? I thought I was the only one. And that, Rod, I think for you and I is what we are all about. We are all about simply being done with the hiding, done with the, you know, proverbial mask, and let's just put it out there and see who this resonates with. And man, the impact, I think about the impact, Rod, that you have had. Yeah, unfortunately, you had to go through hell and back. But for me, I would say redemption is the word. Does the word redemption mean anything to you, where you think about where you were and where you are now?
No, all I think about on a daily basis is how happy I am and how easy life is. That's all that I think about. I don't think that I'm getting I don't think that's a reward for what I went through. I'm just like, God, I wish I'd found this a lot sooner. That's all that I think about. Just not, and by that, I mean, not being afraid that my phone's going to ring, or afraid of who's texting me, or afraid of who's talking to who, or that constant fear. We talked about that in the men's health club. Some guy who was there for other issues that weren't with addiction. He's like, what's it feel like to wake up from a blackout? What's this fear you talk about in shame? I'm like, this is it. You don't remember what you did. You probably broke the law, right? You're waiting to find out. Like, I don't have to deal with any of that, you know, and that ended real fast. So I don't feel like there's a redemption. I just wish I'd accepted the help earlier, instead of having 1,000 people scream in my face, you need to stop drinking, because that's not a real good feeling. And all the opportunities that I've blown professionally, which in the end, it doesn't matter, because I got my family repaired. That's the main thing. But I just want to say, the part of your book where the guy came up and shook your hand and said that reaching out didn't work because he did it to 2 people and the door was slammed in his face. I still think about that all the time, because it's literally like a game show where you got a key and you're trying to open all these doors. You know what I mean? That guy was trying to find the right door. You don't quit after 2 doors. You know, I don't know, maybe if you remember who that guy was. It's just like, you can't quit. The guy took the first step. You know, you don't turn around after the first step.
You know, Rod, that's interesting that you bring that up, because I know exactly when that was. I know where it was. It was rural Alberta. And he was, when he shook my hand, I mean, he did not shake my hand out of great job out there today, Al. You know, great message. It was, you listen to me. You know, I tried doing what you said. It did not work. Don't stand here telling me that I need to be vulnerable and reach out for help. And the two people, Rod, it was his father and then it was the pastor. And they said, what are you asking me? You know, just fix it. And you're so right that, and I did this too for a bit, but I hear that repeatedly where people will be vulnerable, take a risk, maybe see a counselor, talk to somebody, and they don't get what they're seeking, and then they're just done. And it's kind of like, to your point, you just, if you want something different, you have to do something different repeatedly. And what works for me won't work for you, but you got to keep moving forward.
Well, you don't give up. And that's where I was lucky. It all feeds into this business of being at the end of the line. I wasn't, and that's why I say to those families, are you at the end of the line with this guy? Because I wasn't taking no for an answer. I mean, I had a friend over here earlier today because my wife's out of town. We were watching football together, and he was asking about my recovery road. And I said, my first counselor, he and I did not see eye to eye because Allan, he asked if I had ever done drugs. And I said, no. And he goes, what do you mean, no? You're of the right age and demographic. I said, I didn't do drugs. What do you want? And he's like, do you know how many people sit in that chair and lie to me? I'm like, I didn't. I'm not lying to you. So I think I lasted 2 or 3 more sessions with him and fired him and ended up with Rand. And Rand has a completely inverted idea of how counseling goes. And his thing is, I'm going to trust you. Start up here, like 100 trust points. And every time you lie, where the other guy was starting at 0 and you need to build trust. And I'm like, I'm not lying to you. How's this going to work? You know? So I was opening the right door until I found the right guy, and thank God for Rand. But I wasn't going to take no for now. I wasn't going to quit. I wasn't going back to the old life. It was horrible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Wendy chimes in and she says it perfectly. She says, you don't quit after 2 doors. Keep going and want it.
Yeah.
The how is honesty, openness, and willingness. Wendy, you say it well.
Did you come up with that? I like it. Honesty, openness, and willingness.
Wendy, you said it beautifully.
Is that a Wendy thing?
Yeah, Wendy just chimed that in through a comment. So
wow,
says it well. Yeah, and I know that there's one word also, Rod, that really stands out for you, and it is gratitude. What does gratitude mean for you?
Because I'm surrounded every day with people that not only have no gratitude, but I was exactly like them. Always searching for the next thing my whole life. Never happy with what I had. Achieving a level and climbing to the next level. You know, buying this thing and wanting the next bigger thing, the next newer thing. And I just see that so much with people right now. And so, and it's not, I stumbled upon it this way. I was in a Lululemon. And I, behind the counter, it had written on a poster or something, every night, list 3 things that you're grateful for that day. That's it. And so I'm like, what the hell have I got to lose? Like, I was early in recovery. I'm like, I'm going to do this. And it was all family stuff. It was like, I drove my daughter to school today. I talked to my brother on the phone today. I went for lunch with my wife today. You know, it was always family stuff. But my whole life, Allan, was geared towards career. But when I was opened the door to gratitude, it was never, I had a great show today. Oh, I wrote a great column today. It was never that. That just naturally, organically happened where I realized what was important. And then somewhere along the line, the phrase came up that if you're happy with what you have, you'll always have all you need. And it's like, I'm not a Tibetan monk living in a cave with a loincloth going, you know, like we have a nice home and a 80-inch TV and all that, but I don't need the bigger TV. I don't need the bigger house. I'm very happy with what I have. And just, wow, what a light switch that is, because everybody in my world of sports and entertainment is trying to climb to the next thing. I mean, we have a show on national television right now, Game Plus, and my friends are all like, that's great. You need to get on TSN and Sportsnet. And I'm like, back off. It's national television. We're happy with what we have. A lot of it is the people that are in my face and in my ear. I was never happy with myself. I was the voice of the Saskatchewan Roughriders for 20 years, and my friends were like, wow, man, when are you going to go to the NHL? I thought this was good enough. You're a lot of expectations of other people can make you feel like a failure.
Yeah, that's very true. And if you can get to a place where you can understand that what other people think of you is none of your business,
That's where I'm at.
That is a beautiful place to be.
Are you there?
Oh, I am getting there, Rod. I would not say that I am there, but I am on my way.
Yeah, well, it is a process, but we go back to what you and I talked about on the phone this week. Like, I just look at teens right now that are being bullied, and a lot of it is through social media, obviously. And it's a very tough time to be young, tougher than our time. And we thought it was tough when we were kids. It's tougher now. I believe that it is. And I would like to go back. I like to go back and deal with kids where I was. And I don't want them to go down that same road that I went down, because I didn't waste a life. I've had a wonderful life, but I can't imagine how my life would have turned out if I'd have been able to put a saddle on this dinosaur, this T-Rex back then. You know what I'm saying?
Totally.
Like, I'm 47, 48 this week, and I finally realized how not to let my feelings get hurt because of what somebody said about me online. It's taken me since the invention of the internet to get to that point. I'd like to help young people that might be thinking about ending their lives or doing something that will change their life negatively forever because of what somebody said about them or what somebody's intentions were. I'd like to help people that way.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think you do. And I know you do. And I'm glad that you were able to at least arrive at that point. And I'm curious, Rod, you talk about gratitude. What are some other strategies that you use on a day-to-day basis to just be well?
Well, just two. There's two. Like, I say gratitude and acceptance are like the yin and the yang of recovery. We've talked about gratitude, and the other one is acceptance. And it's really simple. It's control. Like, I did a lot of studying on stress because I was instructed to go get stress management counseling, and I did. And I realized what the top two stressors are: money and control. Let's forget about money, but control is a really, really big thing. Everybody's trying to control each other and tell each other how to act in this society that we're in right now. And I realized really early through 12-step meetings what I could control and what I couldn't. And you know what I'm talking about. You can see 10 miles down the road a situation that you have no control over. So I very quickly go, oh, I'm out. And that's my own personal situations, other people's situations, the way other people act, control. So I say acceptance is control. Accept you have no control over this situation, or accept this incident happened and you can't change the past. You need to accept it. You can use that term so many times. Like, I know a guy that I was working with that he said he saw his dad beat up his mom 40 years ago. Dad left. He's never seen him since. And the guy's still drinking now, 40 years later. And I'm like, what is drinking tonight going to do about what happened 40 years ago? It might be a good time to start accepting that it happened. And I'm not going to go any further down that, but you get what I'm saying. To be stuck in an incident from 40 years ago, when do you move forward?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Acceptance, which requires having to go within, and it also requires feeling, which a lot of people have a hard time doing. But when it comes to the word control, there are very few things that we can even control. Yes.
Oh yeah. Well, there was a guy, a pretty legendary program guy here. They said he always sat under a light switch at the meetings, and they always said, "Why do you sit under the light switch all the time?" He said, "It's the only thing I can control." Makes sense, right? And really, in life, the only thing that you can control is your own attitude. So, I find myself getting in these little funks, or getting myself worked up over the pandemic or where we're going, and I got to talk myself down. all the time, and I use acceptance and gratitude. I mean, if I can just, that's the one thing out of this discussion, if anybody can take away, is the yin and yang of recovery to me are acceptance and gratitude. That was the key to me, or the key for me.
Acceptance and gratitude, two powerful things. Here's something cool as we wind this one down. Addison.
Yeah.
Congratulations. You have a beautiful granddaughter who you are about to meet for the first time. Yes.
You know what? Well, yeah, my wife met her today.
Wow.
And my wife flew to Edmonton. That's where they live. Addison turned 6 weeks old today. And they sent me pictures of Addison and her grandma. You haven't met Cindy yet, but you will. They've already nicknamed her Cece. Grandma is Cece. And the photo is the little baby. She's smiling up at my wife. There's nothing better. It's like a Christmas. It's like a card, a postcard. So yeah, I'm a 47-year-old grandfather, and I'm sitting there going, I should have gone. I should have gone to Edmonton. I took her to the airport this morning. They're all coming back here next week. Social distancing. We won't be above limits, Allan. But it's quite a feeling, and I'm very excited to be where I'm at, to be able to accept, or what should I say, experience all of the good that's going to come with this.
Well, the thing, Rod, is you've earned it. Like, you have earned your freedom from addiction, and I'm incredibly proud of what you've done. I'm incredibly proud of the work that you do and that you'll continue to do. I thank you so much for taking the time to share some of your insights and wisdom with us. Much respect. Thank you very much, Rod.
Allan, thank you. And I'm sorry, I just want to say one last thing. You know, you made a point in your interview on our show that somebody had said to you one time, Allan, you're not the only guy that got sober. What did he say to you?
Oh, well, he said three things actually to me. He said, you're not the only person who struggled with mental illness. You're not the only person who struggled with addiction. And then he said, you're not the only person who's been sexually abused. And he said, if you want something different, go get it, because this world owes you nothing.
Right. And what did that do to you? I'm sorry to flip this on you, but
No problem. I mean, what it did to me is it infuriated me, Rod. I was livid. But then I went home and I chewed on it, and I'm like, okay, there's some truth in that. Maybe it is time to remove that victim mentality. Maybe it is time for me to look at some of this, do some work, and do something different. Maybe it's time to stop blaming.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the reason I've thought about that so many times, and I just think, obviously there's people that are out there thinking that about me. It's like, Rod, you're getting these plaudits, you're doing these interviews. I know it. I used to hear it early on in recovery. How come he's getting interviewed? How come he's on CTV Morning Live? How come he gets to speak at this event? And I think, am I doing something wrong here by being public about this? Maybe they're right, those people that say that. And then, but nobody's doing this because you're doing it, but it's a small group, my friend. There's not a lot of people that are out doing this. And when I hear people say you're making a difference, I've never specifically asked what they mean by that, because I don't even know. I mean, just on a daily basis, I'm staying sober, trying to be a symbol for those that are also trying to stay sober, being available for those that need help. And if that is in some people's mind, there's something wrong with that. That's their problem. It goes back to what other people think of you is none of your business. Because I never wanted to be in this position that I was in and walk through the fire, but I did, and I survived. Why would you not try and pull other people out of the fire?
That's exactly it, isn't it? I think, Rod, you are your authentic self. You do what feels right. You do it with gratitude. You do it with compassion, and you live for you. I mean, what else is there?
I don't know, but I'm not turning back now. So, yeah, I'm so glad that Clint Malarchuk said that you and I needed to hook up, and a few others. Lisa Peters did as well, Rand. So it's been a wonderful relationship that's just starting, and I appreciate the time. I feel terrible about the connection issues at the start, but it certainly worked out great.
Oh yeah, let go of that. That's fine. I appreciate it. People like Clint. That's just it. We're all trying to do something very similar. We all do it differently. But the thing that always resonates for me when it comes to Clint is he says that he feels as though he's been saved to carry a message. I'm sure, Rod, that if you look back at all those years of mayhem, chaos, blackout, how is it that you're still here? How is it that you're still upright? Well, I personally buy into the fact that it's probably because you are meant to now share some of what you've learned.
Yes. And because of that, I'm like, whatever you want, just tell me. I will carry it out on a daily basis. I'm done tempting fate. I'm trying to put good out every day. That's all I'm trying to do. And it seems to be working. So
it's working. It's working. Listen, thank you so much for your time, Rod. I really appreciate it. Again, much respect to everyone who took the time to tune in to Mental Health. It's Time to Talk. Thank you. Keep talking. Be well.